I think I've copped a lot of heat for obviously making a number of changes, but I was really clear about what we needed. Everyone thinks I just went out to the Kiwis. We didn't. We spoke to Jamaicans, South Africans, English, Australians.
Hopefully Helen comes out and has an absolutely cracking season, but I think, yeah, they probably need to develop a bit more of a plan B in that shooting end, because we saw this year that Grace and Helen aren't always going to be firing 100% of the time.
I think she's a really great super shot player, and she's also good. She's got good offensive IQ, but I think we all know, and I know this is potentially me being a bit rude, but well, kia ora Netball Scoop whānau, and welcome back to the Netball Scoop YouTube channel. My name is Toby, and in today's video we're summing up the chaotic free agency period that was the 2026 SSN free agency. So, Georgia, what were your thoughts on the free agency period?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of people have been saying it. No one was probably expecting there to be this much movement this off-season, knowing that the CPA and the broadcast deal finish at the end of 2026, so it was only 1-year contracts on offer. So yeah, I think the amount of movement that we've had was just absolutely insane, but it's really good. I think, we had a signing period a couple of years ago where like 3 players moved, and that's really boring. So I'd much rather see a lot of movement, stuff changing, and I think another key contributor to the fact that there was so much movement was obviously the change in the Silver Ferns eligibility as well. That sort of opened the floodgates a little bit for some Kiwi athletes to come over the ditch, but we've also seen a few new internationals from other countries as well, which will be really exciting to see next year.
Yeah, I think to quickly sum up the period, I mean, I feel that the Silver Ferns coming into the SSN was actually a lot more than we were probably expecting. I think some of us thought there would be about 5 or 6. It ended up being 8, with potential rumours swirling that it might be 9, considering a potential replacement needed for either Paige Hadley or Maddie Proud at the Swifts. I think it's going to be really interesting to also see how some of these imports that have been brought over are actually quite young, so I'm really excited to see how they develop in the league. It's not just like these people that have been in the game for 10 plus years, and most of the New Zealand players have, but it's all the South African player. You've got still Mary Chollock in there that's still got to develop a lot, so I'm really excited to kind of see how they go as a non-Australian fan of the SSN. So I think the best way to start, I think if we're going to sum this up, we should start right at the top of the table, those championship teams. Let's start off with the Melbourne Vixens. I mean, they didn't really change a lot in the end, did they?
No, I mean, they've kept their original contract of 10 that was supposed to take the court for 2025. Obviously, just Emily Mannix has announced that she'll be coming back following the birth of her daughter Mabel at the start of this year, which is really exciting to see her back on court. So I think that's only going to strengthen the Vixens just with that extra bit of depth. Rudy obviously had a fantastic season and really held down that goalkeeper bib and probably played the game of her career in that grand final against the Fever. But being able to have Mannix to come in, we saw her play a fair bit of goal defence in the season 2024, as well as her ability to cover that goalkeeper bib. And then fresh off the press this morning was the news that Di Honey is coming in to replace Simone McInnes as the head coach. She's previously sat in that assistant coach role, and I think there was a bit of sort of talk going around the fact that she probably was going to be the one to step into that head coach role. I know a few people were sort of saying, when Simone announced her retirement, they were looking at taking the Vixens in a different direction. I don't know if I'd exactly say elevating your assistant coach to your head coach is a different direction. Feels pretty similar to me. Maybe it's just a slight, veer right rather than a hard right turn. But I think, she knows the setup, she knows the players. So I'm really hopeful that Vixens will have another successful year next year. And I think having seen how a lot of those players performed off the bench, will just go to do them even better this year. Or next year, sorry.
Yeah, I know it'll be really interesting, I guess, because they did have that inconsistent beginning half of the season, and obviously keeping consistent team will brew that success that they were able to produce in that latter half of the year. But looking at the team, there were a couple of players I genuinely thought that might move to get more consistent minutes in those little those players that are on the bench, including like a Zara Walters or even a Maggie Karras. I feel like she could have been someone that stepped up into a bit more game time at another club. So, even though she hasn't even been signed with the Vixens this season, which I was actually kind of surprised about, to be honest. I think she was quite good in her little stints that she had. So, yeah, I think the Vixens as a whole, predictable, and I think they've been predictable for a while now, so it's no necessarily a surprise there. But I think that coming off their championship win, it should be still very exciting, the quality of netball they'll be able to produce.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think Zara Walters is probably another one who, yeah, I'm surprised didn't go hunting for more court time. The Mavs obviously had a couple of spots in their mid-court available, and there has been a bit of movement at other clubs. 2 spots have opened up at the Giants as well. So yeah, but hopefully, given how well she performed in those couple of finals when Hannah Mundy was out injured, we should just continue to see a bit more bench rotation we've potentially seen in the last couple of years with Simone in that head coach role.
Yeah, and I mean, if we move on to our second place, we do have the West Coast Fever in the end, which is, it sounds bad to call them second place after how dominant they were this season, but they've kept a very steady lineup as well, only making the one change with Shanice Beckford stepping off the court for the Fever, and in comes the return of Sasha Glasgow. So, what do you think Sasha will bring to the Fever environment, returning to the squad after a couple of years away?
Yeah, I think this was a bit of an interesting move. Sasha was keen to sort of move on from the Fever environment a couple of years ago, spread her wings a little bit, made that move to the Mavs, and then had that horrific leg injury before she could even step on the court. So I think when she came back from injury this year, she didn't reach that potential that we've seen from her in previous years, whether that was because of the environment, being away from friends and family, returning from such a nasty injury. It was probably a bit of a combination of factors. So I'm really hoping that she'll go back to West Coast Fever and really thrive. We know how much of a threat she can be. She was the MVP in the West Coast Fever's grand final win a couple of years ago. She holds the record for the most number of super shots in a game. She's got the ability to be an absolute star. And I think she probably just is that sort of player that needs the right environment around her. And we know that Fever always talk about having such a good, strong culture. So hopefully that'll be a positive move for her. And then the other player that we'll hopefully see back on court next year will be Ruth Ariang, who, as we know, ruptured her Achilles early in the season. So I think it was only 2 or 3 games she got to play. So they probably will be a little bit unbalanced in the team now. With Ruth coming back, they'll have 4 defenders, as opposed to when they only had the 3 this year because they brought in Zoe Kransberg. I believe Zoe will still be eligible for that 11th player spot, so I would imagine she'll probably get that gig again. And then depending on how Ruth's tracking or matchups, because we know Dan is obviously a masterful tactician when it comes to that sort of stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them using that 11th player role to their advantage to make sure that they can have the right matchup for the teams that they're coming up against each week.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their squad and it's, a team that can defeat literally everyone. And I think it's quite exciting as well seeing Sasha go back. Obviously, for the England team, this will be a really good move for her as well, being able to play a little bit with Fran Williams as well, but also just getting that court time and playing in an environment, I guess, that's a bit more successful than Brood's success. I know that, you look at this squad and think that most of their star players are now the imports, besides maybe like a Alice Neal. And you see that, they've got some developing players like Olivia Wilkinson and Jordan Kransberg that will hopefully see success later on in that Diamonds environment or, pushing up those ranks. But I do look at that team and go, where is the, strong Australian talent? And I think this is a problem that we see throughout the teams is now, the more New Zealand players and stuff coming in. It's really interesting to see how these teams now have more and more imports rather than having more and more Australian players like it kind of did at the beginning. So yeah, I think that is a very interesting squad, and I think they're going to be really successful. But I think, yeah, there are, with, as you said, that unbalanced mid-court, only 3 players, that's going to be really interesting for them this season.
Definitely. And I mean, next up, speaking of international talent, is the Swifts. They've got much stronger Australian contingency at the moment with just the 2 internationals of Grace Wecky coming back for another year, and then Helen Housby, as well as their 2 imports. But as you flagged a bit earlier, there is that potential for another import to come over, with some rumours swirling around the fact of whether maybe Peta Toyava or Claire O'Brien, who, well, I believe she came through the Netball New South Wales pathway, is now a Silver Fern, but hasn't been named in the squad this year. So there's a couple of different talks about the fact whether she might come back over to the Swifts, who she has played for before. But the other main changes to their team for this year was Taylor Fraser coming back, a bit similar to Sasha Glasgow, who moved over to the Mavs. Taylor's going to come back home to Sydney. And everyone was a little bit confused when that announcement first came out. You know, we were all assuming that Paige Hadley would be there. Shani Lambden had a really strong season, and then Maddie Proud coming back from pregnancy as well. But then obviously the really exciting news dropped, I think it was last week, that Paige Hadley is expecting a baby at the start of next year. So all of a sudden everything fell into place a little bit more when that news was released, because you'd be able to expect that Taylor will probably get a fair bit more court time now than she would have if Hadley had been out there as well.
Yeah, and I think, we all saw kind of how they capitulated in that second half of the season. I think, having a full pre-season together, having already had a season together, this will be a team that I think will definitely improve on their results. I think they've got a strong coaching contingent, they've got a strong team, a lot of experience out there, so they shouldn't necessarily be, having those results like they did last season. I think the interesting point for them will just be, can they stay healthy? Because a lot of the time, these players, while they are very talented, one of them's always out with injury. Whether it was like Paige Hadley in the second half of the season, Maddie Proud has been out a couple of times. You've had Helen Housby out a little bit too with niggles. So, and like Tegan O'Shannessy during the playoffs, she was out, and that was a massive loss for them. So trying to keep this team healthy, I think, is going to be crucial for them. And will they have the legs, I guess, to push forward and, push for those top spots next season?
Yeah, I think the other really key thing for them will be Helen Housby. I don't think it's an uncommon sentiment that she certainly wasn't at her best this year. And there seemed to be a lot of reluctance to drag her off court, particularly in the first half of the season. Bryony was a bit better at it in the second half. But, as we know, Sophie Fawns didn't make the game day 10 a lot last year. She's now moved over to the Manchester Thunder for season 2026 over in the NSL. So the only other shooting option they've got is Grace White, who, while she did get a fair bit of court time this year, majority of it was wing attack. I think she maybe played less than 5 minutes, and I think it was actually at goal shooter. She got subbed off for Grace Wecky in a super short period because they were up by so much. So I think seeing how willing Bryony is to make those changes if she needs to. Hopefully Helen comes out and has an absolutely cracking season. But I think, they probably need to develop a bit more of a plan B in that shooting end, because we saw this year that Grace and Helen aren't always going to be firing 100% of the time, and you do need to make those changes. And I don't think they were quite willing to do that this year. And particularly towards the end of the season, I really think that was to their detriment.
Yeah, and I know we've already talked about kind of these teams that haven't had many changes, and now we're moving on to the Adelaide Thunderbirds. And I mean, they've had a lot, and I think their squad looks really exciting, it looks fresh, and it looks quite young too, with a lot of potential. I think that's where, the Thunderbirds may not be necessarily pushing for, top one, top two, based on the look of the squad, because it is a young squad, it's a young attacking end. They don't have the Romelda or the Eleanor Cardwell to steady them like they have, and that's no disrespect to Vanderberg at all. I think she's a great player. I think she's just still young, and she's got to learn SSN. We've seen players like Mary Chollock come over, and they just need time to develop and get the experience at this level. So, but looking at their squad, I mean, they've had a couple of changes. Sophie Casey has been given a full-time contract for the season. You have Shamira is returning for the season too after her pregnancy. As we mentioned, Elmire Vanderberg from South Africa is now a part of the team, replacing Romelda Aiken-George, who retired at the end of last season. And also, for me personally, I'm very excited to see that Kate Heffernan is in the squad. And I mean, Australian fans would have seen her during the Constellation Cup every couple of years, and sometimes she can be But she's been growing as a player. I think that's what's really exciting about her. I think we especially saw that in the 2024 Constellation Cup. She was all over whoever she was playing, whether that was Kate Maloney, Paige Hadley, Liz Watson. I think she's a really towering presence in that wing defence and centre. She's really tall. She's got quick speed, and she's also got a good read of the defensive plays. And I think, she'll be a player that I think will be similar to almost how Amy Sliger was in the second half of the season, really punchy, getting a lot of intercept ball in that wing defence position and also generating a lot of turnovers for her defensive ends. So, yeah, I'm very excited for the Thunderbirds. I think they're going to be a team that has massive amounts of potential, but will they be able to do that in one season? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that, Tanya is often willing to play the long game. She came into the Thunderbirds, can't remember exactly what year it was she started, but they had a couple more years still, dwelling at the bottom of the ladder. That was when the likes of, Shamira Sterling was first coming over, Latanya Wilson, she brought Tilly Garrett over from Melbourne, and there was a few players that she really just took the time to invest in and develop. And she's done that really well, not only with the local South Australian talent that we're now seeing dominating, but also with international talent. So I think, she's elevated Sophie Casey and rewarded her for the efforts that she did in the 11th player spot, where she was in the match day 10 for a lot of the season last year, and then the few international players that are coming over. I think my one concern for this team, which I think is also where they fell down this year, and probably what they could have done a bit better when they were looking at recruiting, is another attacking midi. All three of their out-and-out mid-quarters, being Taylor Williams, Sophie Casey and Kate Heffernan, all centre wing defences. So the only wing attack they've got is Georgie Hodges, and as we've seen, she's often also their best option in wing attack. So I feel like they probably would have been better off trying to find more of a centre wing attack option. If they still wanted to look overseas, maybe something like a Whitney Souness, who's come over and joined the Giants, would have been a better fit for them than Kate Heffernan, who does have that more defensive background. Or maybe they're going to need to look at someone like Taylor Williams playing a bit more of a wing attack role, which we have seen her do a little bit, but it always seemed to be a bit of a panic button option rather than something that was a calm and measured choice. So I think in the pre-season they'll need to sort of nut out exactly how they're going to work that, or they're going to need to use Cameron Brand last year.
Yeah, well, I know you mentioned about, the centre wing defences. I think, Tanya is definitely a coach that loves having a very strong defensive end, and you look at that squad and go, right, there is a massive potential in that starting four for the defensive end. I mean, if you put Kate Heffernan at centre and you have, Latanya Wilson, Matilda Garrett and Shamira Sterling all healthy and strong, I mean, these are probably four of the best players in their positions defensively in the world. So being able to have that much depth in the defensive end, I think every team is going to be terrified as an attacking unit to go up against them. But, they will have, those growing pains, or as you mentioned, just that lack of experience, potentially when Georgie Hodges moves into goal attack, how they're going to play that wing attack position. But I think there's nothing but massive potential in there. And I mean, if we lead into our next team, the Sunny Coast Lightning, I mean, they're also a team. You look at them and their changes where, they have looked like they've gone for defensive depth, and, you see that they've got the addition of Kuttenberger, we've got Ava Black returning to the squad, they've re-signed Ash Irvin, who was a great pickup. I mean, I did doubt why she was returning to a squad that necessarily, should be competing with minutes with Courtney Bruce, but I think, kind of how they've ended up rounding out the rest of their squad, it does look like that Courtney Bruce will probably play a lot of time at goal defence with how the makeup is, so that's quite exciting. And then they've also got the two new additions of Danelle Wallam coming back from New Zealand after a great season and having an experience against the New Zealand players. I think she'll come back, full of fire. She looked like she found her love with netball again, so I'm really excited to see how she kind of goes there. And then Gabby Sinclair. I think this is probably the most interesting pick out of all the picks that have happened in the competition. I mean, we saw that Steph Fretwell had retired, so bringing in a experienced goal attack I think was really necessary. This pick with Sinclair, I think she's, a really great super shot player, and she's also good. She's got good offensive IQ, but I think we all know, and I know this is potentially me being a bit rude, but she's no Steph Fretwell. And I think, she hasn't had that international experience on the international stage, not just going over to the UK. I mean, she will have, I think, a calm head, I guess, in that 5 minute period, but now there's going to be a huge reliance on Cara Conan to almost spearhead that goal attack position this season, I think. And I'm just not quite sure if, we've seen her be a bit inconsistent throughout the years, whether this was the um, right recruiting strategy, I guess, from Belinda. But what are your thoughts, I guess, on this?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that you've said. They're really excited for the defensive end, particularly the addition of Kardenberger. We know that she's an absolute menace. And I think, Lightning sort of said this year they don't want to be known as the nice team. They want to have a bit of grit, a bit of mongrel to them. And I think Karden is the perfect person to bring over if they want to keep building on that. As for the attacking end, I think knowing that, super excited to see Donnell Wallen back playing in Super Netball, really stoked that she's been able to sort of really reinvigorate herself over in New Zealand, and then the spots opened up for her back over here. But as you said, it does then push Conan out to goal attack. And while we do see her there a little bit at the Super Netball level, it's still with Steph out on court. And I think we particularly saw in that Diamonds environment for the first year or so after Steph wasn't there, she looked a bit lost. And I think, not to say that she doesn't have that netball brain or that netball IQ there as well, but when you've got someone like Steph out there, she just does it all for you. You don't need to be quite as switched on and sort of making the play, making the moves, all that sort of stuff yourself when you've got someone like Steph that's directing traffic and telling you what to do. So I'll be really interested to see how she goes playing more of that goal attack role. She's got the fitness there, I don't doubt that. But I think, yeah, her ability to just be that bit more of a playmaker will be a really interesting thing. And then agreed in terms of what you said with Sinclair and bringing in someone with experience. I think that was probably what was needed, maybe for this year. But then my one concern is just the age of that cohort. I think Donnell Wallam's over. I think she's 30 plus. I think
Mm.
Kara's 29, maybe turning 30 later this year. And then Gabby's 32 or 33 as well. And while we're showing these days that, players can play well into their mid to late 30s and still be at the top of their game, I just don't think it's a very good succession plan, knowing that all three of those players are sitting in that similar age bracket in the same area of the court. It'd be different if you had them sort of dotted through the court, but I really think they probably missed the opportunity to sign someone like a Nat Sligo, who's been a training partner with them for a couple of years. She's a really good goal attack, wing attack swing, and has played really well for the Lightning Bolts reserves side this year. And she's that bit younger, so she's Amy Sligo's twin sister, so she'd be 23 or 24, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that was probably a bit of a missed opportunity. So now I am really hoping that she gets signed on as the 11th player, so that they've got that ability to bring her into the squad when they need to. They've had Maddie Hinchcliffe in that role for the last couple of years, but I believe she'll have aged out of that now. So I think this is a really good opportunity for them to bring someone like Nat into that role and hopefully use that to, similar to what we talked about with Fever, switch up the sort of makeup of their game day squad depending on the teams that they're coming up against. If they're going to need that bit more of a smart playmaking goal attack, you might look at bringing someone like her into the side for that particular game.
Well, speaking of the twin sisters Sligo, I mean, let's talk about the Giants. And I think the Giants are a very interesting squad on paper. I mean, we all knew that they were probably going to struggle with recruiting based on A, the uncertainty around the head coach, B, the uncertainty around, is it called Giants Netball? Who owns the netball, organization now? I think, that kind of uncertainty wouldn't necessarily bring, intrigue by players. So I think looking at their squad, it's a really cool squad. I think they've got a lot of young players in there, and they've brought in a few bits of experience, which I think are really important in that goalkeeper and wing attack position. I think, people probably looking at, bringing over a Whitney Souness and a Jane Watson would be slightly confused, I think, necessarily just because they're not necessarily the picks that, spark like, oh yeah, they're going to be here for the next couple of years and whatnot. But I think what they're going to do is really bring just that leadership during this period of figuring out, okay, what is our succession plan for the next couple of years? Because you look at the rest of the team, they're a very young squad. And, you know, with the addition of like a Lucy Austin as well, she hasn't had much experience over the last couple of years in SSN. So really having players in here that can just immediately from the get-go bring that voice, bring that leadership in those really important positions, I think is a really exciting prospect.
Yeah, I think, you know, we saw how well someone like Erin O'Brien did, and even that Amy Sliger as well, once they brought in Casey Coppola to replace Jodie M. Ward. So I think, yeah, getting in someone with the experience of Jane Watson is only going to do wonders for the continued development of those two. They're two of the best goalkeepers that New Zealand have had in the last couple of years, with Kelly Jackson coming through now, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But I certainly think that, yeah, the knowledge and direction that they'll be able to bring to those two young defenders who are both Diamonds invitees is going to be really exciting and is only going to help them grow. And then I think the other player that's worth mentioning is Casey Adamson. She's one of the few players that's been elevated from that pathway level that wasn't actively a training partner. In fact, I think she's the only player across the league that's come in who wasn't involved in. Oh, actually, no, I think she wasn't a training partner, but neither was Sasha McDonald, who we'll talk about in a minute at the Mavs. But yeah, I think because we've had so many Kiwis come over, we've seen less of those pathway athletes brought up. So I think it's really exciting that, especially considering she's not a New South Wales athlete, she's come through the Victorian pathway. Really good to see that the Giants' new coach, Nerida Stewart, has been looking broadly at what her options are to make sure that she's not only bringing in that exciting international talent, but also continuing to develop that Australian pathway as well.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at their squad as well, they've only, you know, from their, you know, 2021 grand final year, or it was either 2020 or 2021, they've only been able to keep one of those players. You know, they'd been so long known for not changing things up and keeping the same squad despite potentially not being, you know, clicking or, you know, severely declining in their results. And I mean, this is what I think makes them exciting, because they've gone, right, we're going to do something completely different. We're going to give a lot of people opportunities to just go out there and play their netball and see kind of how they go. And I mean, their shooting is really exciting. I think, you know, the interchanges that they can do between all three players, including Lucy Austin, a goal shooter, and a Matisse Leatherero, I think that's really exciting. I think Erin O'Brien and Amy Sliger after their Diamonds camp will be really interesting to be brought back into the squad after that experience to, you know, elevate their potential and see how they go, especially after, I think each of them ended up in the top 2 or 3 of all the defensive stats in the end. So, you know, to only elevate themselves going further, I think that's going to be a great pickup for them. And yeah, as you mentioned, the Mavs have had several changes too. So what are your thoughts about their squad, especially because it does look very young, but there are a few new experienced players in there?
Yeah, I mean, they've had 5 changes across the, oh, 6 changes across the board, whether you'd say Unique Pallavi is a change for them or not, because she was in the game day squad for the whole season this year as Cardwell's replacement player. And same with Jessie Grenfold, who was in for Lauren Parkinson this year. But regardless, they've got 6 new players who are on a full-time contract, which, yes, the team has struggled over the last couple of years to really reach their potential, so they probably did need to make a few changes. Whether they needed that many, not too sure yet. I think, you know, world's worst kept secret in terms of Jamie Lee Price was announced as a signing for them. I think that's huge for their mid-court, especially with the loss of someone like Taylor Fraser. I think she'll really anchor that mid-court together. We know she's played with Amy Parmenter before, both at the Diamonds and then for a couple of years at the Giants. So hopefully their combination will just go back to what it was a few years ago, because that was a really successful combination for them. And then I think probably the signing that not many of us saw coming was Tara Hinchcliffe making the move down there as well. She's someone who's a really strong leader, again reuniting with a former teammate in Kim Jenner back when they were up at the Queensland Firebirds when they were both quite young and inexperienced. So I'm really excited to see what Tara can bring. She was vice captain at the Lightning, a spot she got in only her first year at the club and maintained that while she was there. So I think that just goes to show what sort of person she is. So I think she'll be really invaluable for the Mavs in that sense. And then the other couple of players who have popped up on their list is Riley Batchelder, who's also come down from the Lightning. Not quite sure if she made that decision before or after finding out that Steph was going to be retiring, because you would have thought she'd be in for a fair bit more court time this year with Steph having moved on. So I think it'll be interesting to see who takes on that goal attack starting bib, whether it is Riley or if Unique gets the call up there. Both really creative players, both got the ability to shoot from range, so I'd expect that we'll probably see the combination of the two of them in the super shot period a little bit as well, which we often saw this year with that Unique and Sasha combination. And then the other one that's a player elevated from the pathway but has still been around for a while was Sasha McDonald. So she was involved with the Vixens during the 2020 COVID hub, so up there as part of their extended squad. I can't remember if she got on court or not, but after that she went over to the UK and spent a couple of years with the London Pulse. So she's certainly been around the traps. She's had a really good year with the Casey Demons down in the VNL, and she's got that ability to swing across goal attack, wing attack, and I believe into centre as well. Can't imagine you'll be needing much centre coverage with the likes of Molly Jovic or a Jamie Lee Price. Certainly that wing attack position between her and Molly Jovic is probably up for grabs, and then she'll bring something a little bit different to that wing attack role as well. Now all we need is a coach. We know that Carl Richardson has been announced as as continuing on in the assistant coach role, but still no news as to what's happening for the head coach. So it'll be interesting when that news drops in, hopefully the next couple of weeks. I'd imagine it can't be far away.
Yeah, I think, when I look at the squad, I do see that there's a lot of great talent in there, but I'm not necessarily sure if they fit all the 7 pieces that they need in order to win. I mean, you've got a lot of experience in that goal defense position, a lot of experience in that goal shooter, and a lot of experience in that centre wing defense. So I am excited to see kind of players push beyond their boundaries and see kind of how they go. I mean, Molly Jovic hasn't necessarily played a whole lot of wing attack at this level, so I'm excited to see, she looks to be the player that you would put in that position. So I'm excited to see kind of how she goes. I'm excited to see how the goalkeeper position goes for them as well. I think, Grenvold had a really good couple of games this season, but necessarily doesn't have the experience of a Kim Brown or a Tara Hinchcliffe. So it will be interesting to see how they fit the pieces together, but that is the job for whoever the coach is, and I'm excited to see kind of how that goes. And I think to segue into probably, I believe, was the most exciting team in this free agency period. It's a team that, has had a lot of, and the coaches admitted it from the organization's perspective, of a lot of controversies and a lot of struggles actually around recruiting players after a couple of, interesting years for them. But I think you look at the Queensland Firebirds squad and I'm just really excited about it. I think there's that mix of Australian talent. There's a mix of really creative imports in there too. It's not just one country dominant. I think you've got 3 or 4 different countries in there that are bringing different spices and flavors to their game, and also the signing of potential players that can develop and grow into Aussie Diamonds in the future. So I'm really excited to see kind of how they go. And what were your thoughts, I guess, on the Firebirds squad when you saw it?
Yeah, so I suppose as you mentioned, there's the 3 new additions of either former or current Silver Ferns with Kelly Jackson, Maddie Gordon and Pia Selby-Rickett. I think Kelly Jackson and Maddie Gordon I'm particularly excited for. I think having Kelly Jackson over will just take the weight of the world off of Ruby Beckwell-Doran's shoulders, who's not only had to be a leader within that defensive circle, but also across the whole team. So I think this will hopefully give her the chance she'll still be able to lead the team. I would assume she will continue in that vice captaincy role, knowing that Helita Veve won't be back next year, but hopefully on game day and on the court, she'll just be able to worry about doing her job and not have to worry about also supporting her fellow goalkeeper, because Kelly Jackson's going to be able to do all that on her own. And I also think as an Aussie, it's going to give our Diamonds players nice exposure to her and hopefully mean that we won't be as spooked by her big long arms as we have been in the past. So hopefully that does us a few favours come the big tournaments in the next couple of years. I can see you shaking your head there. You're not too keen on that idea.
Yeah, no, I'm not excited about that. But I mean, it is the way of the game going. I guess the more experience you go up against all different kinds of players, it's going to be, let's see who is the survival of the fittest. And I think, yes, it's going to benefit the Australian players being a bit more comfortable over the lane, but I think Kelly will also get smarter in how to use it more effectively as well, rather than just putting the lean up and hoping for the best, which, you know, there was a couple of years where she was doing that. So, no, I'm really excited with this squad. And, you know, I got the fortunate pleasure to talk to the coach of the Queensland Firebirds, Coach Kiri Wills, all about the squad, including, you know, a bit more of an in-depth look into kind of not only my perspective of how it looked, but her perspective on why she signed specific players and how she's very excited to bring this cohort together. So why would you want to listen to us any longer? We've got great dissection from Coach Keddy Wills here with you now. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm very excited that today we're joined with this podcast, none other than the coach of the Queensland Firebirds, Kiri Wills. Keddy, how are we doing today?
I'm great, thank you. I'm home in Auckland for a little bit to see my husband and my dog, so I'm a happy little camper at the moment.
Oh, love it. And I mean, it's been freezing over in Auckland, I've heard, so hopefully you're surviving after the nice sunny rays of Brisbane. I mean, yeah, the 2025 season for you guys, not exactly, I guess, how you guys planned, but I mean, upon reflections, you still had, you know, 2 really good wins in there, and you gave such great experience to those new players to Suncorp and also the debutants from Queensland. So kind of, you know, going into 2026, how do you view 2025 as a whole? Honest thoughts, but also do you see that there's been, you know, good foundation for next season?
Yeah, look, it's tough. The only sort of piece of the equation that the outside looking in look at is that place on the ladder, and so we're eighth from 8. Is never something that you want to be, but our stats and our tracking say that our players are tracking in the right direction. So throughout the competition, they made progress. Those who have been involved with the Firebirds before, like the Ruby Bakewell-Dorans, the Isabel Shearers, the Emily Moores, their work rate lifted, their ability to execute their roles also lifted. But it just tells us that even though we're getting another 5-10% out of those players, the whole competition is still shifting forward. Obviously, a lot of chat at the end of 2024 and kind of plagued us going into 2025 was all the chat about the culture. And I think that was the one thing that no matter what happened, we wanted to have another narrative and a narrative that's real. Like we don't just make stuff up. It's not fantasy. So my role was to go in there and just start again, which was an amazing opportunity for a coach to get the team together and say, okay, things haven't been great, but what do we want it to look like and what do we want it to be? So in that respect, I think we've kicked a lot of goals. We've set a platform and a foundation for the future of this club and a template that we will repeat, but we need the performances to come on top of that now.
Yeah. And I mean, you're definitely used to, I guess, you know, creating those franchise cultures and whatnot from the stars that, you know, not necessarily a whole lot of Australian viewers would know. Like the 2017, you came in and it was pretty much nothing was there, and you were able to almost, for a lot of people that don't know about ANZ Premiership and the Stars, they definitely talk about, you know, community, bringing in those Māori and Pacifica elements to it, and South Auckland is a huge part of that. So what do you think, I guess, for viewers that don't necessarily know some of the stuff you did in the background for the Firebirds this season, what are some initiatives I think you did this season to build that culture or those foundations for your culture?
I think, you know, the Stars was easier for me because it does talk to my cultural roots. So I think I was really mindful when I went into an Australian franchise that I didn't come across and try and cookie cutter what I did at the Stars and put it on top of the Firebirds, because that's just not who they are. But I think what I bought was I'm very, very conscious of authenticity being the basis of good leadership and good team dynamics. So what I wanted to do was create a space where I was clear and true about who I was, and we were really conscious of also getting that back from every single person who is involved in our day-to-day environment, so that we knew and understood each other really well, and establishing really clear values for the club, for them, that we just every time, and every time we lost and we were in the mire of 7 losses in a row and things like that, and that's when your culture really has to stand up, because it's very easy for teams at those points to fall apart and not follow process and not be who we said we were going to be. And I think that's the thing that I always bring to a team. Teams do this all the time. They set their culture, they set their values, but then it kind of gets put on the shelf and clouded over, I think would be the word I would use, by the tactical elements of the game. You still have to go back and review your behavior and how you're achieving those tactical elements. So that's the basis of how I coach. And I think the thing I am most proud of is how these girls, because let's face it, we had a whole lot of new faces in there as well. How those girls who'd been there before and the new girls came together and they stuck together, and they never let the disappointment of losing blow up the team. We had always have blow ups, because that's just expected in a high performance environment and some really challenging conversations, but it never got to a point where everyone was going their separate ways. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
No, it definitely did. And I mean, going into the signing period, I think a lot of people thought that the Firebirds, after, the 8th place finish, would make a few little changes to what was there. But you guys almost became, one of the big talking points coming out of this period with all the changes that you did make. So when you went into the signing period, this is probably, I guess that this was your first time being able to kind of establish who you wanted in the team and whatnot this season. So what did you go into this signing period looking for, I guess?
That's a really easy, short answer. It's experience. We roll out onto the court every single game, and we've got 250 caps, SSN caps, between the whole squad sitting out there on court, and you're standing next to an individual who's got 250 caps. So I think I've copped a lot of heat for obviously making a number of changes, but I was really clear about what we needed. There's moments in games that we're just not, like we could have put the Vixens out of the final series completely with our last game against them. And it's those final finishing touches that experience brings you. And we've got some amazing young talent. We've got new imports who were first-time SSN players who are working towards those things, but we didn't necessarily have the people to get us over the line. So that was pretty clear quite early on. I think also we've had some injuries that have forced my hand in some places, but in the end, I was looking for hard-nosed international experience and or fringe Australian players. So I think everyone thinks I just went out to the Kiwis. We didn't. We spoke to Jamaicans, South Africans, English, Australians. We spoke to everybody. And I think the thing about the Kiwis was they clearly wanted to be in this competition and they really wanted that opportunity, whereas some of the others were sort of playing us off against different people. That happens all the time. But my relationships and I guess the trust that those 3 players who are coming have in me meant that they were prepared to pull the trigger first, and that's where we've ended up. So I am really stoked. We went hard early. We actually started some of those conversations prior to the signing window just to see what the appetite was. And they weren't the only Kiwis that we spoke to. There were others, and And the appetite was clearly there because we've seen the result now with other teams pulling in Kiwis as well. And for every player we spoke to, there were other franchises after them. So, you know, people like Kelly Jackson don't just have us as an option. So it's a push-pull, it's a push-pull system. It's about, I want people who really want to be here, but I needed that experience, and I'm really excited about next year. But every team's looking quite different. It's been quite a hectic
Oh, it's been
contracting window.
insanely chaotic this signing period, I guess. Especially just having those Silver Ferns or New Zealand players come in, it's really diversified once again. How, as I remember you saying on another interview, that it's almost becoming like the NBA of, you know, netball, which is really exciting. And I guess for you guys, with your signings, you did get one experienced player in all 3/3 of the court. And I think, you know, you definitely, as you mentioned, you missed that last season, especially in your attacking end. I think from the outside, you could see it. And I think lots of people, I guess, were surprised that it was Tapaya who you went with. Obviously, if they hadn't watched ANZ, but you know, she's coming off her best domestic season. She has so many test caps with the Silver Ferns, and she's played with a tall holding shooter like Janelle before in 2016. So what are you kind of excited that Tapaya will bring that you didn't necessarily have in that goal attack position last year?
Yeah, well, you've actually nailed it, Tobey. It's her work with Janelle. So Janelle's first contract, her first professional contract was with the Steel. Back then, you know, it was 7 years ago. So Tapaya was a young up-and-coming goal attack herself and trying to establish herself as a Silver Fern and things like that. So she knows how to transition goal shoots who have probably dominated in other leagues across the world simply because of the size, which is Mary at the moment. She's dominated because she's 2 meters tall, and we just need to help her understand where her best space is. And Tapaya will help her to do that. And not only has Tapaya worked with Janelle, but Ali Bird as well. Both tall players who just needed a little bit of care, and the word I would use for Teeps is composure. So nothing's ever, she doesn't get stressed, or she could be like, you know, the duck analogy that it's all still on top, but the legs are going underneath. Tapaya is a very good thinker about the game. She's very game smart. She will be able to, she will look into that circle, see what the options are, and make a call that will, one, open stuff up for Mary, but two, create space for herself and for her middies. I've always had a lot of respect for Tapaya, and actually I've always wanted to work with her, and I tried to get her to the Stars quite often. So again, I'm excited about her and what she can do to stabilize that attacking unit down there. Yeah,
I'm definitely excited to see, because obviously she is that player that loves playing with the ball rather than, you know, trying to pass it away or pass it around to someone else. So definitely will be exciting to have a player like that in SSN. And then going to your midcourt, you obviously have that experience in there, like Imogen Allison and Macy Gardner and Laura Dunkley, that have already kind of been in that environment. But now you bring in Maddie Gordon, who has that Kiwi flair. So is it kind of looking, I guess last season you did a lot of interchanging with your players in that mid-court space. Is it kind of just trying to find, I guess, someone that can be consistent at a world-class level, and you've already seen someone like Maddie do that for the Silver Ferns?
Yes, so Maddie is a gun, you know. When I said to my analyst, Justin, I said, can you pull me the stats from ANZ? I want to look at these players. And he's like, oh my God, Maddie Gordon, she's such a gun. So it is about just stabilizing. I will still look to run into changes. I do think netball needs to come out of its traditional mold of we only make changes when the crap's hitting the fan. We should be able to make strategic injections with people. The data that we have from an S&C, from the GPS units, show that there are ebbs and flows and what players can produce in such a high intensity match Our game was short, sharp, really explosive. And so if you've got opportunity to bring fresh legs in and change things, and I think the really beautiful change that I liked this year with Macy and Lars was that Lara is a taller midi, and then you've got Macy with a little bit of speed. And so even just the switch of positions with them always lifted our performance. So it's just looking at how those interchanges can work for you. I would like to consolidate that mid-court a little bit more though, and not change as much as I did. And that's where Maddie can come in. And Maddie also, like Tapaya, has worked with sort of green, like Amelia Walmsley, for instance, when she went to the Pulse, she was pretty much fresh out of high school, and Maddie showed how she could connect with her. She's not afraid of letting the ball go long. She will do the work around the circle edge if needed. So she brings versatility as well. So there's so much going on in the midcourt. That's going to be a very competitive part of the court. But competition brings performance. I've always tried to make sure that the team was reasonably balanced. Like, you don't just have a 7, you have a 10. And I think what I've been given this year.
Yeah. And I mean, going into that defensive end now, you know, Kelly is a gun, as you mentioned about Maddie, but she is just an absolute unit in that defensive end. She's obviously one of the more experienced players. She was, you know, played in ANZ Championship. She's been a 3-time Lewis Muir Supreme winner, you know, New Zealand's best player for 3 years in a row. And also, I'm kind of excited to see how she works with Ruby, just because it's almost giving me Pulse combination vibes with Paris Mason. And also having that, you know, Maddie Gordon at the front and like an Imogen Ellis and that grafty defender. So how excited, I guess, that you've got almost that experience in that defensive end now in that goalkeeper position. And we saw, you know, with teams like the Giants last year that, you know, experience in the defensive end is just so crucial.
Yeah, and that's really why we went hard for her, because she is she's genuine world class. She's got so many caps. I would be surprised if she's not in the leadership mix now that Amelia and Ignacio is no longer available for the
100%.
And it's the leadership piece that I'm looking forward to her bringing. Her game is fully established. She knows what she's doing. But also all of these players, all 3 of them, are excited about the challenge of SSN. So stepping up. And they've been, so for Maddie and Kelly in particular, they've been in that Pulse setup for a long, long time now. So stepping into this competition and into a new team is a huge challenge for them, which I'm really stoked that they've taken the challenge. But yes, you're right, Ruby, I'm really looking forward to what that unit can do. But equally, I'm going to have a look at the having a huge unit out there with Gizzy out, Goldie
100%.
with Kelly behind her, and then potentially start growing Ruby in that wing D position as well, because we've seen it with the Swifts do it a little bit when they've got Tegan O'Shannessy available. They put out and they shift Maddie Turner, which can be quite useful against a team like the Fever. Rather than waiting for it to be thrown in, let's put more pressure and height out the front. So that option's available to us as well. But yeah, I agree. Casey Corpua brought so much to that Giants unit that really was, to be honest, floundering prior to being in there. And then she came in and just a bit of direction, a bit of chat, a bit of, you know, solid getting in behind her girls, totally face of that defensive unit. So I think Kelly is not only there for team, but she's also there to help us grow 2 of Queensland's best talent in terms of Ruby and Giz, and helping them move forward with their careers, because they're the future. They're the future of Aussie netball and the Firebirds, I believe. So we're lucky to have Kelly in there to help shift some stuff for them. And I know they're really excited about what she can bring.
Yeah, and I mean, 2026 for you guys looks super exciting. I'm really excited to see what you guys produce. But just like a final question, I guess, obviously we're several months out from the season and you've got lots of planning to do and hopefully lots of wins that we'll see. But kind of guess in a general summary, what are you kind of excited about to bringing in these New Zealanders, having all this international flair plus these amazing Australian talent? What are you must be so excited for what you're going to produce next year.
Yeah, I did shout myself some bubbles once we've done all our signing. I have to say
Yeah.
I was a little bit nervous around the exemption process and whether Netball New Zealand would come to the party, but they have. So once it was all done and dusted and we knew what we had, we immediately went into can't wait. We at the moment the players are all on leave, the SSN players, but even some of our players were like, can we start tomorrow? Can we just get started? This is really exciting.
Yeah.
So we just, there's just a really good feeling. I just want more wins. This is the thing about SSN netball is we want to win netball. We want to play finals netty. We're going to have to work for it. Looking at all of the teams across the system, everyone looks really strong next year. So it's not going to be easy, but I think we've put ourselves in a position to be really, really doggedly competitive week in, week out. And we're all really, really excited. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat today, Kitty. It means a lot.
No, thank you.